let me tell you the story of the sea giant and the enormous fish. I spent my summer drying and tanning goat hides. When I finally had enough to sell at the village market, I piled them up into little bundles, tied them with a piece of twine, and stacked them neatly in my fishing boat. Where I live, it's very mountainous and rough. So the easiest way to get to the village is to take a boat up the fjord and then follow the coastline to the village shore. So there I was in my boat, and I started to get hungry, and all I had to eat with me was a small crust of bread. It was several hours to the village, and I knew I wasn't going to be happy, so I had an idea. I took the twine off the bundles of hides, tied them all together in one long string, pulled a nail from the deck of my boat, and tied it to the end of the line and put a crust of bread on it. The other end I tied to my wrist so I wouldn't drop it into the sea. And then I threw the nail into the water and waited, and after a short wait, a teeny tiny little fish came up and began nibbling on the bread. And then after a moment, he opened his mouth big and wide and swallowed the entire nail. Well, as amazing as this was, the fish was far too small to eat, so I decided to let him go. And as I started to pull the nail up, a larger fish came along and ate the first fish. This gave me an idea. I thought perhaps if I waited long enough, an even larger fish, one big enough for me to eat, will eat this fish. So I waited. And sure enough, after just a few minutes, a much larger fish came by and swallowed the other fish. This one was much bigger and good enough to eat, so I started to pull it up to the surface of the water. But as I did, an even larger fish ate that one. And then a larger fish ate that one, until finally I had such a huge pile of fish on the end of my line, I was struggling to get it up into the boat when a giant, enormous fish, the size of a whale, came by and ate all the other fish and then dove down into the sea, taking me with it because I had the other end of the line tied to my wrist. So down and down we went, deeper into the water till we got almost to the very bottom of the ocean. And then this huge hand reached up and grabbed the fish and started to pull it down. I recognized the creature right away. It was Aegir, the sea giant, friend of the gods, whose name literally means the ocean. Well, Aegir saw me dangling by the rope, and he said, "What are you doing there?" And I said, "This is my fish. I caught him, and I'm going to eat him." Well, Aegir shook his head and said, "Oh no, I'm giving a feast for the gods tomorrow, and this fish will look great on my dinner table." Well, sea giant or no, I wasn't about to let Aegir take my fish. So I did what any man would do. I challenged him to a wrestling match right there on the floor of the ocean. So he let go of the fish, and we locked arms, and we got into such a struggle with such furious energy. Whirlpools began to form on the surface of the ocean, and great tidal waves came crashing down on shores hundreds of miles away. But I thought I was getting the better of Aegir, when finally I started to lose my breath, and I needed to come up for air. So I let go, and I started to swim toward the soft surface of the water. Aegir got very angry, because I still had the fish tied to my wrist, and he thought I was trying to escape with the prize before the contest had been won. So he stirred up the ocean, and he called upon his friend Thor to bring the lightning and the rain, and the waves tossed me about like a children playing with a ball, and I thought for sure that I would drown. But then I remembered I still had the fish tied to my wrist. So I jumped on the fish's back, and using the fishing line like the reins of a horse, I rode the fish all the way to the village shore. Once I was safely on land, I thought it would not be right to eat this fish that had just saved my life. So I made a pact with the enormous fish and told him, "If you were to cough up all the other fish you swallowed that day, you may go in peace." And he opened his mouth wide and set forth such a huge mound of all different kinds of fish that by the time I was finished selling them at the village market, I went home with a full purse, a full belly, and in a bigger boat. Now, There is a lesson to be learned from this. When going away on a long journey, always remember to bring a snack.